that overarching master planning aspect of the planning process. And then each of the individual ideas goes through a similar but smaller scaled assessment. When you're thinking about an innovative new program, sort of who is the target, how does it benefit the state, how does it benefit the residents of the area, how are we filling a need, what are the resources needed, both in terms of buildings, budget, academic resources. How do we sort of put together a program that can fulfill the need that's perceived? Is that all sustainable? And there's a series of layers of refinements that go into place before that package comes before the decision makers on campus with UW System, with the Department of Facilities Development, and ultimately all going through the Board of Regents and the state legislature. So at every step in those processes, people are looking back to things like these overarching visions to make sure that it is consistent with those strategic goals. We don't want to be running kind of willy-nilly, chasing everything that shines. We want to make sure that it fits into that bigger vision for the system, for the campus, for the region. And if it can pass all of those tests, one of which is, does it make sense here? That's part of the process. At times, the master plan needs to be adapted to a new vision. This is based on a sense of the traditions here on campus and the heritage that this campus has, but also a sense that we're reinventing some of that. And the role of the university is always to be looking ahead, exploring, developing new ways to be connected to the knowledge, information that's out there, how to adapt it to our specific lives, leverage it against the local economy, those sorts of things. That changes constantly, and being nimble and responsive is part of that ongoing responsibility that university leadership has. So at certain points, this framework, as much as we've made it flexible, will strain against some of those more innovative aspects of your vision. At that point, it may be more tweaking the master plan and then going back and sort of working our way through the rest of the process. So it's not as linear as one would hope, and there's no sort of guarantee I've waited my turn, but the process moves through a series of incremental steps, each one with more detail, each one with more specifics in terms of cost, both operational and capital, and then becomes something that is actionable at a number of levels. Is that a fair response?
We have plans to finish the Interloop Road this fall with Brown County, connecting the STEM Center to the inside of campus. We are paving the softball lot here in the next month or two, 6 weeks, probably that'll be done. So those are a few things already being done. You see the new dorm going up. So we have a number of these things already in play, but as Joe mentioned, we are competing with the entire system in the state of Wisconsin for resources, right? So we have to fund a lot of designs and pre-designs and studies before we can even take these to be requested at the system and state level. So this is a visionary document and a plan that things change all the time, they evolve. So like they all said, this is a guide for us for the future, but it doesn't mean that it's something that can evolve or change. I think, a few things have changed since this was even drafted here a short time ago. So, and we paused this process a bit so we could do that space study, which helped us inform where we're going for the future as well. So I don't know if Bob or Tom or Jeff have anything else to add to that question about how we move along this process, but.
Just say from the Board of Regents standpoint, to get to nuts and bolts. Sure, Tom Bittner, UW System Administration, Office of Capital Planning and Budget. So every 2 years, the Board of Regents, or I should step back, we ask each institution to essentially forecast the next 6 years of capital budget requests. That then feeds into what the Board of Regents will do on a system-wide or agency-wide level, where they have to put together a 6-year capital plan and then also a 2-year capital budget. So that's how these things move through. And so some of those things become circular, some of those become linear where they actually go forward. Plans like this, individual space plans, individual project development plans, feed into that whole process. The Board of Regents has approved criteria that all enumerated projects are measured against. So I don't know if that helps get to the nuts and bolts of the actual physical. So we're starting a new cycle right now. Every institution is submitting their next 6-year forecast in the middle of November. That then feeds into the Board of Regents in August of even-numbered years, so in this case 2024. That will then get passed on to the Department of Administration and then the state of Wisconsin, hopefully for July of 25 enumeration. That's the nickel dime tour.
Well, one of the things that we strove to make that connection is, you know, the STEM building is the first building in the Phoenix Innovation Park. So, you know, expanding the Phoenix Innovation Park gives the community another reason to come to campus. You know, right now, the general community comes to campus for Widener Center events. Some of the women's basketball games. They certainly come for the Arboretum. You know, one of the things that we heard from students is that they didn't think that the Widener Center was even part of UW Green Bay. They thought it was a separate entity. So I think by doing some of the things that we've suggested, Phoenix Innovation Park, making something more of the Bayshore, you know, make other reasons why the community should come to campus. You know, there's nothing you know, if you build it, they won't necessarily come. You have to give them a reason to come. So those were kind of the things that we were thinking about, and then make it easier for them to come. Make it easier for them to find their way around, find the entrance, find the parking, those type of things. You know, obviously there's some business connections through the business school. I think they're out in the community bringing people on campus more. So right now, people are coming to campus for specific reasons. You know, it's a destination, probably because of the location. But if we can make more amenity spaces and more reasons why the larger Green Bay community will come to campus, that's how we would make more connections with campus and community. There's no easy answer. It's incremental steps.
I get the idea of wanting people to meet and socialize and bump into each other, but it is Wisconsin and the students aren't even here in the summer. So I was just wondering if you could talk me through that.
Sure. When we first start, you know, I think when we started the master plan process was on the heels of the Coffran pre-design process. So I think the Coffran pre-design was looking at renovating Coffran as an option or building new. There's some complexities with renovating Coffran on the Coffran site or tearing down Coffran and building it where it is now, because utilities run through Coffran, all the concourse systems run through Coffran. So it's, you know, it's the center of the spider web. Pulling that, and because of where it is and the elevation and grade changes like Drew had mentioned, you know, it really, there's a barrier on the perimeter of the quad to utilizing the quad. You know, you can't put a band in there, you can't put vendors in there, you can't physically get a vehicle inside the quad to do anything because of the concourse system. So by pulling Coffran out of the quad and beyond the steam, there's a steam line. So that's kind of what was one of the barriers as to why Coffran on the master plan was located where it was. But by doing that and disconnecting it from the concourse system, then it opens up the quad, and then it's a true quad. And then forcing people, we're not getting rid of the concourse system per se, but if you create breaks in the concourse system, people can still get around campus through the concourse system. They just can't touch every building. And as much as they would like to, because we heard a lot that, part of the master plan should connect STEM to the concourse system because that's the only building on campus that's not connected. But I think, there's some costs with upkeeping of the concourse system, maintaining it, heating it, cooling it, those type of things. So by breaking that, then it really does create the significant quad space, and that can be a program space. And, we are in a colder climate, but days like today and this weekend will be fantastic, and the students will be here. And if you build it, but they will. No. Oh, they're not here this weekend? Well, the residential students, do they move in this weekend? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. Well, in every year, new students will come, and next year's students won't know that Coffran was ever connected to the concourse system because they will show up on day one and it won't be. Yes. Because right now, like Joe, campus is introverted. Everything is focused inside. Students talk about the Arboretum and the green space and ecology and EcoU, all of that, but it's all focused inside. There's not a lot of connection. You can't go from inside to outside easily. In the winter, the steps and ramps are roped off, so even if you, on a sunny day when it's 30 degrees out in the sun, you can't go from A to B outside. You have to go inside. Maura Donnelly tells a story about a student who woke up late from overslept for a final, got on his bike because he couldn't get through the concourse system, but he couldn't get to where he was going to go on his bike because he couldn't get there. And you get so focused on the concourse system that you can't think beyond the concourse system. How do you go from lab sciences to studio arts outside? And even when we've done our stuff, we go from Wood Hall to the Union outside, and it's, construction was happening, but it's what could be a 3-minute walk is a 15-minute walk.
All right. One of the questions I had was kind of who was the sustainability focus group? Was that mostly students? So I'm curious about who that group was.
It was a sustainability group, focus group.
Okay.
So the sustainability group,
Okay.
because the students were
That makes sense. Okay. The other thing I was interested in hearing more about is whether kind of low impact development could be a part of it more so. I think there's kind of, at least when I look at it, it seems like there's a bit of sprawling happening. And I'm wondering if we could build more vertically with the Phoenix Innovation or something like that, just so that we're not kind of continuing to develop forested areas and the like.
Well, I don't know, Drew, do you want to answer the green spaces and the...
Yeah, so I think the first part of that is with any state project, there is a series of sustainability goals that you walk through. That for something of this size, it's considered a tier 1 type building if it was to be a new building, and it would have several, not specifically LEED goals, but very similar to it. in ties with sustainable construction, but also sustainable use. Like, is it socially sustainable? Is it connected to things like pathways, bus routes, transportation, that sort of thing? And as far as some of the green spaces that we create, we've definitely increased it and we've connected it very intentionally. So things like the quad getting larger, Phoenix Park getting larger. We've created several clusters of things like combining all of the housing into individual buildings instead of having a series of them would certainly improve the utility aspect of it. And when it comes to Phoenix Innovation Park, those are really driven by individual developers, third parties coming in. So if the campus was to work through developers who have sustainable goals in mind, those would certainly be implemented on the parcel that they're developing. But also when UW Green Bay initiates those negotiations, that could certainly be at the forefront of the development process for each one of those lots.
I think it's also important to put the sprawling aspect of the master plan into a bit of context. One of the roles of this is to be a bit aspirational and anticipate a framework that allows tremendous growth, more than any of us would pragmatically say is possible. But one of the jobs of this is to do a bit of dreaming. And there's an ambition in this area to leverage the talent and the potential that's here and to artificially suggest that things can't happen within a master plan would frustrate kind of that opportunity and the potential that this community has. We're suggesting that that's one end of a spectrum of improvements that are possible, and the first of which is there's a lot of physical space constructed here, and through simple maintenance, through adaptation, through revitalization, much of that can be tailored to fairly innovative programs in support of things that you've already started and things that you're imagining. So there is an emphasis on reusing some of the physical plant that's already in place. Our look at parking is another good example. I think from a pragmatic standpoint, it's just a lot to maintain. There's some benefit to sort of undoing paving and returning it to a natural state. There's not the soils here don't allow a lot of water to infiltrate quickly. So think of it in terms of stormwater management, maybe not as effective as one would hope, but just sort of returning it in some way to a natural element reinforces that respect for the environment and tries to concentrate some of those more man-made experiences on campus into that central core, and then allowing a little bit of distance, but not so much that we lose the connectivity. So that balance between density and connectivity to the natural world is something we're trying to balance. Are there other?
Is there any questions from?
Yep.
Hi, Shara Cherniak, faculty in the Professional Program of Education. Thank you for your research and your work and your presentation today. I have an idea and a question. The idea is if we do these learning streets, the idea that came to me was making them educational in some way as well. So like how the Keith White Prairie is talking about the importance of prairie to the Wisconsin landscape. So I could imagine that kind of thing. If there's like a wildflower natural ecosystem area, there could also be a kind of learning card or something there as well, kind of combining some outdoor park educational spaces with these learning streets, I think could be really cool. And then my question is, I didn't hear you speak to accessibility in terms of physical mobility. Right now, because the campus is so spread out, I know that it can be hard for people who have different physical mobility needs. And so I'm hoping you can speak to that, please.
So from an accessibility standpoint, we didn't address that specifically because any new development obviously would have to take accessibility into account, ADA, current building codes. But some of the things that we suggested would increase the existing accessibility on campus. If you envision how visitors arrive on campus, they go to Coffrin. They park somewhere, they're nowhere near the entrance. You get to the circle, and then you go down a paved cobblestone path to some doors, and then you have to go quite a distance to get to where you want to go. So I think, by pulling Coffrin out, bringing it up, that building will be fully accessible. Connecting that, or, how is student services then connected to the new Coffrin? Because again, the entranceway down into student services is a snake-like path that leads down to the green awning. So that's not, it might be technically accessible, but it's not very friendly. So those type of things, again, getting rid of the outdoor, artificial berms, make it flatter. Obviously outside is more difficult to make things, wheelchair accessible, but it'll be more accessible to a greater number of people. And the learning streets aren't streets. They're more of just a way to get in and out. And I think when you think back to what we learned when the original comprehensive plan was done, that was the goal, is that they were outdoor spaces to get into campus, but on the sides that you can go into the different colleges from those learning streets. But those pathways were, interactive zones with students and faculty and staff intermingling, going in and out and across the streets. Yeah, passive learning.
So my name is Wyland Fair. I'm a junior on campus. And I don't really have a question, just some feedback about the concourse. I think it's a great mistake to break it up and get rid of it. And I know someone up front said that, in 4 years, students aren't going to know it anyways, and the goal is to bring student life outside. But over the past couple of weeks, I've been going to the other UW campuses just to see what they're like, because I've never been to Whitewater, for example. In Green Bay, it's the only one with a concourse system, and I think it's kind of what makes it special. Because it is cold here majority of the year, it's snowy, it's terrible outside. And then just for general inclement weather. There's a day I went down to Oshkosh and it was raining cats and dogs. I really wish I would have been in the concourse system here at Green Bay, because I wouldn't have gotten soaked and, had to drive back all the way super wet. That's not fun. So just from a student's perspective, I think it's a great mistake to break up the concourse system. Thank you.
The general reaction it is northern Wisconsin, and the campus faces northwest. There's a reality to that. We did try to explore the notion of elements that provided some sense of enclosure, but if you can imagine giant doors that would open and allow a vehicle to pass through them and sort of access the quad. I think our underlying sense was that no matter how we sought a technical solution to maintaining the concourse and allowing access to the quad, we were left with this sense that the moat that both the concourse and the recognizing that there are trade-offs, and, you've outlined them pretty succinctly. Those are things that you have to evaluate over time. There's the practicalities of this particular Coffin relocation project. There are ways to sort of reconnect if you had to, be expensive, but we think the underlying issue with that is that it returns the campus to the sense of its physical heart, its geographic center is blocked off. We're denying access to the place where we could really build that sense of community between all of the colleges that comprise the university. So intentional, maybe not